Good evening, everyone. Welcome back, Thirsty Thursday number 32. And this is the start of our new kind of partial series where we're gonna kind of talk about some of the classes that are offered by Strike the Box Training. So tonight we're doing it's one of the more traditional, not traditional, but one of our older programs, the first in, first five. So we're talking about the first in arriving, whether it's a truck, engine, whatever it is, and then the first 5 minutes. So what are our priorities? What do we need to get right from the start? And this is for those, the firefighters that are riding the seat, the guys and gals that are looking to promote. So they're like the acting lieutenants, that first line company officer, and even beyond that. So we can always adjust it to talk about some command roles. Again, if you're a battalion chief, assistant chief, you're the shift commander, and you're pulling up, what are the first things that you want to consider in those first 5 minutes, based on what you have in front of you. So we're going to give you, like I said, a little glimpse into the first in, first five, and we'll kind of go from there. Trevor, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, my brother. How are you doing? I'm
Good,
kind of dodging raindrops right now. So
cheers, my friend. Bobby will be joining us eventually. He's with his son Timmy. They're doing some Special Olympics training tonight, I believe. We were working yesterday together, and he had said he's going to be a little late. So, me personally, I'm excited for the series. Kind of again show off what Strike the Box does, some of our programs. Me coming into the instructing a little late, and as kind of the COVID pandemic took off, I haven't had the opportunity to really come and teach a lot with the guys. But I know Bobby and Trevor have taught this program all over the place. I think the most recent one was at the Alaska Fire Conference in September of 2019. We were hoping to go back, but financially that it wasn't an option for us. So Trevor, you want to tell us a little bit more about first in, first five, and kind of what was the impetus to get this class or to do this?
All right, Ben, great question, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And glad to be back. And we've kind of gotten over a little bit of a rough hurdle with the 20th anniversary of September 11th. A lot of things that we've done, we've been through. Of course, we went through also the anniversary of the deployment to New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina. So we've looked at a lot of different things, and if I reflect back on that, we look at things we did well, things we didn't do well, things we absolutely screwed up, and things we want to do better the next time. So with the first in, first five, the impetus of that, Ben, which is an excellent question, was okay. Let's take all of the calls that we've made over the years and look back at them, not to point a finger, not to play Monday morning quarterback or anything else, but to say, what could we have done better? What did we learn? Because the old fire service adage of, as goes the first line, goes the fire. But those first 5 minutes are so crucial. And all of us have done excellent jobs on the fire scene. All of us have done okay jobs on the fire scene. All of us have done half-assed jobs on the fire scene. And all of us have, one way or another, we have screwed something up. So first and foremost, let's own that. And again, this isn't to poke anyone in the eye or say, we're better than you, or our patch is shinier than yours, or all that kind of BS. So what I'm looking at is, over the years, if you screwed something up and you owned it, the next day you get to call that experience. That day you're still a screw up, but the next day it should have become experience. And what did you do to correct it? So we're not going to give the high and mighty lecture of leadership and what you should do and being a good team boss. I mean, that should be ingrained in you, and we'll get to that in some of our other series. But some of the pictures we'll show you later on. Has anybody ever stretched short on a fire? Well, whether you admit it or not, you probably could have done a better job, even if you didn't stretch short. So there's other things. Was your positioning is good? Were your tactics is good? So that was really the impetus of this whole thing, was to look back at a series of good, bad, and ugly and use them as teachable moments. And at all levels, whether you were a firefighter, whether it was something that you either did or didn't do on the fire ground, as a company level officer, as a command or incident command level officer, all the way through. So that first 5 minutes is so crucial. And when Bobby comes on, I certainly want to give him credit for this. One of the teaching points Bobby always uses is that, look, you're probably going to make a mistake on the fire ground. And it's not that you made a mistake, it's how you recover from that mistake. Just like if we pull a cross lay and the previous shift just completely screwed up packing it, well, we can sit there and shake our fist in the air and yell at C shift, if it was C shift. We can yell at C shift and, talk about how much they suck and, they spend, more time watching YouTube videos than they do out doing training. All that aside, what are we going to do on the fire ground when things go from sugar to shit real quick and we still have to get the job done? So, one of the things that we look at over a period of time is the majority of us came up either in direct order operations or SOP based operations. So, like when I first got in, wherever that lieutenant or captain took their radio antenna and pointed it, that's the direction you went in. You followed that order, you completed that order, and then you reported back. Then we got a little more sophisticated. We did SOP-based operations that the first engine shall do this, the second engine shall do that, first truck, second truck. And that's all well and good, except what happens if there's a delay? What happens if the second truck doesn't arrive in the order that it's supposed to? What happens if, go back to probably one of the last fires me, you, and Bobby were on together at the Lazy Lizard, that, all right, well, maybe our third due truck wasn't ours. It was actually from another department, let alone another state. So we have all these considerations. So that's when we've kind of, again, evolved into more priority-based operations, which I've taken a little bit of a liking to. Still like the SOP/SOG, MOO, whatever the flavor of the month is that we want to call it. But what are the top priorities? And I will say this, the first in, first five is something that my department gets regularly, whether we call it that or not, but we talk about that, being that best one-line fire department that we can possibly be. That's not a indictment or any kind of cut as to abilities, but our bread and butter is getting on the scene, making sure that we've taken care of the life hazard, and we get that first line to the seat of the fire as quickly and as efficiently as possible. If my folks can do that, probably I'd say at least 90% of our problems have gone away, and the rest of it's just fine tuning. And I'll give you an example. We had a fire in a multifamily dwelling. It was a fourplex apartment building. Fire on the first floor, bottom right corner, and we run minimum staffing like most people. And my officer on that engine had the forethought to take a different running route. It didn't cost him any time, but he took a different running route just so his pump panel would be facing the door where the crew was going in, because he knew once that pump was set, he had to be part of the crew. The pump operator had to be part of the crew. And that little bit of forethought was excellent. And within 2 minutes of receiving the alarm, they were on the scene, had a line stretched, and in under 4 minutes, they were calling back to say that the fire had been knocked, and they were completing the rest of the tasks, with the rest of the assignment coming in.
And they put the chief in service too, right?
Nah. Well, they kind of know better. They can put the chief in service, but he's kind of squirrely and he's going to come in anyway. But but they did a phenomenal job, and all we did was fine tune to say, okay, hey guys, what do you think about your positioning? Well, we did it. Hey, you know what? You did an excellent job, but if you pulled forward 15 more feet, you could have gotten another view of the building. And on your 360, when you came in, you saw the Alpha side, the Bravo side, the Delta side, or you could have seen the Delta side. The only thing you're missing was the Charlie. So if they had pulled 15 more feet, that wasn't a ball busting thing. That was a, man, great job. But here's something that we can tweak a little bit and do some fine tuning. They chose to operate off the tank, and the water supply was handled, but no one called over the radio to say, hey, next engine in, pick up our line at the hydrant, or next engine in, go ahead and reverse lay to the hydrant at Claremont and Ocean. Not a big deal because the task was taken care of, but these guys were telling me what they should have done different, and it wasn't a checklist to say, okay, here's my goody people and my bad people, but they did their own self-assessment, and to me, that's what it's all about. So again, they did an outstanding job, but their first thought was, what can we do the next time? We had to do this all over again. What would we do again? Exactly the same, no changes. What will we change? And what were some things that, wow, that's a wake up call. And fortunately, like I said, it was fine tuning. I mean, I couldn't have been happier with the outcome of that incident. Everybody was able to reoccupy except for the fire unit. Primary searches, secondary searches were taken care of. Utilities were controlled. Ventilation was taken care of. The 360 was taken care of. All the way around, these guys just hit a home run. So that's what I'm getting at with that first in, first five, is that it gets to be so natural. And there were some things that didn't go the way they wanted them to, but they were just able to recover and bounce back. And I kind of, I know I'm conflating a little bit with this, but you look at the SEAL Team 6 when they went into the Bin Laden compound, things didn't exactly go by the plan. Okay, they lost a helicopter, but you know what? They're like, okay, that wasn't part of the plan. Keep going forward. Let's figure this out. And they were mission oriented, and that's what we need to be. We need to be mission oriented. If something doesn't go to plan, we take a step back. Sometimes we don't have a lot of time to reevaluate, but we just reevaluate and we get our mess together. We go to work and we complete the mission. We can piss and moan and bitch and complain, and all the keyboard cowboys watching YouTube the next day can get online and tear us up if they'd like to. But the bottom line is, firefighters doing what firefighters do, evaluating what occurred so they can apply what they learned. End of the day. So, kind of going back to what you're asking, Ben, is that first in, first five looks at the things that you can do prior to that incident even occurring that's going to make you better even prior to arriving on the scene. And talking about arriving on the scene, look at this. It is
there he is.
Bobby McGee, the man, the myth, the legend.
Sorry, guys. We had Special Olympics got held up a little bit.
Oh, no worries. How'd it go?
Good, brother.
How'd Timmy do tonight?
Did great. Actually, very fast. Did a very good job. So.
Outstanding.
Cloud cover helps. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bobby, glad to hear you, brother.
Interrupt you, buddy.
You're not an interruption. We were just talking good stuff about you. Well, actually, we talked bad stuff about you now and good stuff about you before you came on.
Cheers.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
Hey, Bobby, I was talking about a few seconds ago. One of the things that you've always tried to impart on people is that it's not that you make a mistake on the fire ground or in those first few critical minutes. It's how you recover from it. And you kind of train not to only to that muscle memory, but you look at something more mission based than you do specific task based. Like if you pull a cross leg and it winds up being a pile of spaghetti, you still got to go forward. So I'm going to throw you right underneath the bus right away. Since that's something that you definitely believe in, tell us what's in your head on that. How do you try to impart that on your crews?
When I was growing up, I was like never picked first for sports teams and things like that. I just wasn't very athletically adept when I was younger. And so when I got in the fire service, I think that was a little bit of a hiccup for me when I first got started. And so then I learned that through working and training that I became, better at my craft. So I think maybe, in my situation, I knew that I had to improve. And I knew that from when I came out of school. I played sports and stuff like that, but I was never the first team guy. I was a JV guy the whole time through school, basically. So when I got in the fire service and I started training and practicing, all of a sudden things started to click, and that really kind of made me feel good. And then all of a sudden, you could be competitive with those guys that were natural athletes. The fire service had a lot of natural athletes in it. A lot of guys were the starters on their football teams, their baseball teams, and things like that. That a lot of those guys were attracted to the fire service. So what happened was all of a sudden I realized that, wow, I can kind of keep up with these guys. And in some ways, if I trained hard enough, I could actually eclipse them by 5 or 10 seconds on a hose line stretch or something like that, so on and so forth. So I always tell the story about Cal Ripken. So we live around the Baltimore area, so Orioles fans all around here. And Cal Ripken, he's nicknamed the Iron Man. Made a bunch of consecutive starts, 21 something, I don't remember, but a tremendous amount of starts. And I remember a story about Cal Ripken where his fielding percentage was like 997 when his career finished, or some crazy number like that. And what Cal would do was, they said that if he missed the ground ball to the left, They said that Cal would show up 2 hours before regular practice, batting practice, and just have them hit a couple hundred balls to the left. And Cal's saying was, I'm not going to miss a ball to the left again. And apparently that was, how Cal ran his baseball career. And I thought about that as I said, I wasn't that level A player, and Cal Ripken, wasn't probably as naturally talented as some of the guys he played against. But Cal Ripken put in the work. He did his thing, and all that work ended up paying off for him. When I think he was almost it was a 280 or 290 lifetime batter, and you saw him play. He changed his stances all the time. He changed how he batted. So, anyways, that's kind of where I took it from. And then the whole thing about like the hose loads falling off your shoulders, I think, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. So if you train to be really good at not having that happen to you, that's what you should train on first. And then you start training for eventualities of having to add a line or take a line out. And the final thing is, like, if you actually drop that hose load on the ground, how do you grab that coupling? How do you make that a short drag load to kind of get there? And so that's kind of where I came from. That's been kind of my history and things like that. And I've learned that even those guys that were the top level athletes, if they don't train and practice and keep up with this stuff, they're not going to keep up with it either. So that's it. I hope that answers your question, Trevor. Kind of jumping right in here, but yeah, that's
No, Bobby, it absolutely did. And to that end, it's almost like trying to make your weakness into your strength. And whether it's a true weakness or just something you're not really confident in, we have to be the master of all these different things, or supposed master. And it's just like the folks that'll say, oh well, those ladders, we call them ride wells because they ride well on the side of the engine. Well, if you're not confident or comfortable climbing ladders, the best thing I can suggest to you is get out there, go one rung at a time, go to the side of the fire station, turn that weakness into a strength. If you're not really confident or comfortable with pediatric calls, have someone shadow you and mentor you, but by all means, put yourself in that position that, yeah, you might fall on your face. And I think that's part of it too, is we're very reluctant to really run the risk of failing in front of our friends and colleagues. But if they're really our friends and brothers and sisters and colleagues, they're going to pick you up and try to coach you in the right direction. And I see that more often than not, where the majority of it is in our own heads, where we're our own self-limiting factor. And it's okay to make a mistake, especially the further up the chain that you go. Sometimes you'll see people starting to shy away a little bit from the performance-based things, not because they don't have the capability, but they just don't want to be vulnerable or fall down in front of their peers. Well, guess what? We're going to. And again, if they see how, like someone like you or Ben, hey, look, I just screwed up, but here's how I recovered from it, and you keep going forward and complete the mission, to me, that's the emphasis of what we're trying to do. And Ben, I showed you earlier, I sent you some clips out of the First Five program. I've stretched short on some fires before, and if you make a mistake that day, I mean, you're a screw up. You're only as good as your last call. But if you learn from it and you evaluate what happened, you try to apply what you learn, the next day you get to call that experience, and then hopefully you take that and try to teach with it.
And I would even say it's not even the next day. I mean, you like we've said before, you're only as good as your last call. Well, your next call could be 5 minutes after you clear the previous one.
No, and Ben, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's just that your shift's not going to let you forget that until the next day. I ought to clarify that one, but you're correct.
I work with Bobby. He's not going to let me forget it ever.
Well, exactly. And to that point, again, if you're fortunate enough to work in a busy enough place, you can apply what you learned a lot quicker, because you might have a similar enough call that same shift or maybe within that same week. If you're in a slower department, and Bobby, this kind of harkens back a little bit, and I'll get you talk about that kid again, to that, where if you have slower fire duty or you're not as busy, it might be months to even years before you get to apply what you learn. And that's where that bridge of training comes in. And Bobby, I apologize, because I always forget where the young man was from. But remember that guy? I think they said he had one house fire in the last 30 years. Would you mind sharing that with us again? Because I just think that's just a great story, and I have so much respect for that kid.
Yeah, so we were teaching out in Wichita, Kansas, a great place and really great training opportunity. At the time, it was a much smaller training conference. It's gotten really big, and it's really an excellent conference to go to if anyone gets a chance. I think at the time, Trevor, if I'm right, we had like only 100 students or something like that. It was fairly limited. So it was really kind of a cool thing because we would do our training and then we would go out. And there was like a place called the Pump House out there in Wichita, which is a nice place to go. And we'd all network, and it was really those are always good times for firefighters, you know, to kind of
Network.
network, right? Whatever you want to call it, Ben. No judging.
No
uh,
judgment. No.
so this we had this younger guy was doing our class, and he was just so attentive, and he was so into everything that we were doing, and he was trying to, how does that work? What do you do and things. And he was just like a student you would always want to have, I guess is the way to put it. I mean, he paid attention, he put in the work, he watched what we were doing, he listened to what we were saying, and all that. And so we were out that night, and he talks to me, and he's still picking my brain about little things here and little things there. And I said, man, you are really you're just a great guy. You're trying to figure all this stuff out. And I think it's awesome. And he said, Bobby, he said, I'm from a town called Longton, Kansas. And he said, I don't remember how many years he'd been in there or whatever, but I think it was more than a few years, I think. And he said, we've never had a dispatch for a call in a structure since I've been here. So I was like, wow. And if you look at a map and look at Longton, Kansas, it's pretty much all by itself. So they had more like wildfires and those types of things and so on and so forth. But they had never been called to a structure. And he said, you know what? When we get called to that structure, I want to know what I'm doing. And to me, I thought that because I've always worked my career in what would be considered nationally slower places. We're not seeing 2 or 3 fires a month. We're seeing maybe 2 or 3 fires a year. And so, I mean, I kind of looked at that and thought, well, that's kind of where we all come from. Is most of us come from. We're not running 4 box alarms a day. That's just the very busy urban departments, those types of areas. And most of us aren't doing that. That's been me my whole entire career. So, I really appreciate that. It made me kind of think back a little bit because sometimes, we downgrade ourselves because we're in slower departments and things like that. And I thought, you know what, put it into training. So when you do have that call, you do well. And it's funny you said that, Ben, because, you know, teaching puts a different light on you. Teaching people kind of look at you like if you make a mistake, it's a much bigger deal. And I know teaching hand line pulling is something I do a lot, and every now and then I screw it up. And luckily it's less and less and less all the time, but every now and then. And I remember it was Ocean City. I think Trevor, I think you were still there. I was teaching hand line pulls. We do it 4 weeks in a row, and we do it over and over and over again. And I was demoing a stretch and a hand line, and it came out like spaghetti. It was an absolute mess. It was one of those unfixable messes, if you know what I'm talking about. We've all probably seen them on fireground. So, um, and what can you say? But you know what? I messed that up, and I think that's part of what fire service is you're not only as good as your last call, but your next call is only as good as troubleshooting your last call and saying, what did I do not quite right? What wasn't good? I mean, I've had times where I struggled in working fires to get my gear on, which I get really mad with other people about. And so you go back and you kind of, hey man, what was wrong with that? What was holding me up from putting my gear on? And oh, it was raining out. Well, that was an excuse. I didn't use an excuse. So why was that? Well, you know what? I had to switch to large gloves instead of medium gloves. The medium gloves were more comfortable when it's dry, but when it was wet, I couldn't get them on. And you get busted for that. Hey, how long did it take you to get your gloves on, Lieutenant? you know. But you learn from it. You don't cower in the corner. Don't make excuses. I mean, one thing that the fire department never run out of is excuses. There's a huge truck out back of every firehouse in this land, and it just has a plethora of excuses. So if you don't want to put in the work and you don't want to try to improve yourself, there's a big truck out back. Just go out there and grab you anytime kind of old excuse you can possibly get, kind of go from there. So, yeah, so that's kind of, that's the gist of all of this. I think just that we just have to continually improve and continue to review and kind of look at ourselves and so on and so forth. And yeah, I would bust on you, Ben. I mean, we joke around with a lot of people a lot of times at the firehouse, but sometimes we give ourselves excuses too quick. And you need somebody to kind of bust on you a little bit. Maybe just think about it a little bit. So, well, maybe it wasn't as just something that happened to me, but maybe it had something to do with me. But and it's also good fun.
Yeah. No, and I mean, we had a lot of really great conversations yesterday on our shift, Bobby. And one of the things that I would say is, or that I would bring up is a couple of things. One is I really enjoyed being a paramedic and practicing every fourth day, and have had a number of calls where like we get through it, but then afterwards, we're riding back into town, talking to my partner and saying, "What about this? What about that?" And we're having that conversation to kind of rehash it and go over it, and should we have done something different? We had a priority call a couple weeks ago, and we're still talking about that call. Should have done this differently, should have done that differently. The QA person on our shift, Travis Hearn, I'll throw his name out there. I'll get a text message after a call or the next shift after he's reviewing them, and I give him a hard time when he sends me a message that says, "Hey, I got a QA thing for you." And I was like, "Oh, come on, man," But then I give him a call and we talk about the call that he's talking about, and I call him to say, "Hey, what specifically do you need? I'll go fix it right now." And imagine the phone call taking a minute, and we end up on the phone for 15 minutes talking about the call, talking about looking at the EKGs, all this kind of stuff. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of all of this, and coming to shift and learning as much as I can throughout all of that. And then the last thing, and we're going to give Bobby a little bit more praise. He's not going to be able to get back in the house because his head's going to be so big. But one of the things that he's talked about a lot on the time that we've worked together is be able to do everything yourself. So Trevor was talking about the fire that they had earlier with minimum staffing, and most places have minimum staffing. So it's a driver, an officer, and a firefighter. So you have to be able to do what you need to do with that limited personnel. We're not all the FDNY where we can get off the engine with 6 people and trample the fire out. Sometimes you have to make it work with a driver and an officer, or driver, officer, and firefighter. So one of the things Bobby's been saying is, make sure you can pull the line and stretch it by yourself and effectively. Make sure you can throw the ladder and place it and climb it effectively by yourself. So that's one of the things that I know I need to start working on more. We've been pretty busy and with calls and all that kind of stuff. We're coming into our slower season, the next month or so, where we'll be able to do a little bit more of that. But that's one of the things that's on my mind of like, all right, well, if I'm the guy in the back, I know Bobby's going to make his 360 do that. Our driver's getting that ready. I need to be able to stretch the line and do that correctly by myself. And then if we have someone extra, that's great. But if not, then I know it's going to be done correctly and before Bobby comes back from his 360. So that's something, again, I've really enjoyed about coming full time and being there more to do that. So.
And Ben, that's one of the things that I appreciate about people like yourself and Bobby. And we have several other of our friends, brothers and sisters and colleagues who are the same way. Is they're solution based. They're not problem focused. They're solution based, and they're also mission focused. So the way that we get to achieving the mission might be a little different from A shift, B shift, C shift, D shift. And I'm not advocating running 4 miniature fire departments in one, but we might have a little bit different avenue to get there. But if it's safe, effective, and we get the job done, then we need to look at that successfully and also share that information, because that becomes another tool in the toolbox for some other folks. We don't get that functional fixedness where we put the horse blinders on and forget about the overall mission. And I saw it the other night. Bobby, you remember this when we were doing some acquired structure training for safety and survival, where and this is, gosh, some years ago, some apartment complex on 20 something street. And we gave them the scenario. They were on the second floor. Conditions became untenable. Get out, get out, get out. And we had people lining up at a window like lemmings jumping off a rock, which I've come to find out now that's really not true. I guess they don't line up, but anyway, another story, another time. But we had these people lining up to do tool bailouts where there was 3 or 4 windows in this one general area, and they could have gone to a ladder truck that was positioned outside of one window. They could have gone to a ground ladder that was positioned, but instead they got that functional fixedness. And we were doing some rope stretches the other night, doing some high-rise training and talking about the mid-rises and walk-ups and some of the other options. And not to confuse some of these folks, but it's everything's an option. You have to be able to take the scenario at hand and be able to adapt to it. And of course, when they were doing a rope stretch, they sent down a carabiner on a rope, and they were just trying to. Of course, some of them were doing the firefighter 2 skills card, doing a clove hitch with a triple Lindy and a twist and a double backflip and all this other stuff. It's like, stop. You already got your firefighter 2. You're good. Don't worry about it. I'm not assessing your ability to go through the entire family of knots. I need you to get that line up there. But they got so functionally fixed because the guy on the end of his rope had a triple action carabiner. So you had to pull down, you had to twist, and then you had to pull back. And I make, you know how I am with that stuff. If you're not doing with the fire gloves on, of course, because they're under fire conditions. Well, they were getting so messed up. I was like, hold on, let me show you a little quick trick. If you take the rope and just kind of tuck it through and make a loop out of it, just like a dog leash or a lasso. But I said, your problem is that you're a firefighter. You're not going to let that carabiner defeat you, even if it takes you 20 minutes to unclip that damn thing. And I said, that's great. I appreciate that motivation and that drive. But we have to look at the mission, and then we can come back. I said, because if you stay up all night at the firehouse, making sure you can articulate that or activate that carabiner with your gloves on, more power to you. I think you're doing a great job, but don't waste the time on the fire ground. I said, but that's our mindset as firefighters, that damn it, this isn't going to defeat me. And we've all done it. We've sat there and beat the living dog crap out of a door with an axe and a Halligan bar when we could have gone down 3 feet to a section of drywall and probably breached through and gotten into the same area. Because damn it, that door is not going to defeat me. So we do get that functional fixedness from time to time. And that's where that first 5 minutes that you're talking about, Ben, is so critical, because sometimes we will waste time unbeknownst to us thinking that we're making progress, but sometimes we'll waste it ourselves.
Yep. So let's get a little bit more into the first in, first five, and talk about some terminology that we use with our size ups. And one of the things that we use a lot is the single family dwellings. So we talk about single family dwellings, and you go on scene, engine one's on the scene, nothing showing from a single family dwelling. Well, that doesn't really paint the picture. And the Blue Card program, they have assigned different sizes, so that way, and it's standardized. So that way, if you say it's a small, a medium, a large, that you automatically know what size that is. But another thing that you can do is talk about the square footage. I can tell you that, I could tell you square footage. I can't tell you if it would be right. One of the things that I would try to do mentally is compare it to what my house is. I know my house is about 2,000 square feet. So where does this house compare to that? So some of the things that
mine is much smaller, Ben.
Well, I think they're counting the attic, which I don't use. So, from our program, which we're going to throw up here.
And hey, Ben, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I just got to get on my soapbox really, really quickly. And I do realize I saw our brother Rat was on earlier, and if he were to get on a soapbox, I think OSHA would make him have fall protection. But that's another story.
Depends how big the soapbox is.
I'm talking standard garden variety soapbox, but
yes.
And I know we can split hairs, and people have different nomenclature in different parts of the country. But one of the things that's always bothered me about the term single family dwelling, is, to your point, Ben, it doesn't paint a good picture. And if I'm coming in as battalion chief, as an instant commander, whatever stuff you have on your collar or your front piece, I'm trying to get a picture in my head. And yes, I should probably have a pretty good idea of the structures in that particular area, that neighborhood, whatever the case might be. But when people say single family dwelling and you see the picture on the screen, well, that's a very common, let's say probably 1,100 square foot, 9 to 1,100 square foot private dwelling that exists in most of our areas. And if you were to ask generally any firefighter with, let's even say, minimal experience, to paint me a picture of the layout, the floor plan of that house, they're probably going to say, okay, well, there's your front door. You got a bedroom to the right, second bedroom to the right, across the hallway in the back. There's probably a third bedroom or a guest room. In the middle of the hallway to back on the right-hand side, there's a bathroom. Straight back is a kitchen. To the left, where that bay window is a living room or a family room. And then you have a little laundry room off to the ass end of the bathrooms. And that would be a very, very probably accurate picture of that house if you've never been in it whatsoever. So anyway, I'm sorry, Ben. Yeah, I know you want to scroll through this, but that's
You're
just
good.
kind of my thing.
You're good. Go ahead. Take your time.
No, but we'll say, okay, this is a single family dwelling, which I would not poke anyone in the eye whatsoever if they say, okay, well, Engine 4 is on location. We have a single story wood frame, single family dwelling, fire shown on the alpha side, and the rest of your brief initial report. Well, that's all well and good, but we all know as well, and especially during different times, when we say single family, we're usually thinking about the nuclear family that might be living in a structure like that. So you might be thinking a retired couple, a younger couple with a kid or two, whatever the case is. You could have multiple families living in there, but because they don't have multiple electric meters and there's no cars in this driveway. And we've been through this many, many, many times. Some people don't have vehicles. Some people, they're one vehicle family. We found motorcycles and scooters out back. They might take public transit. So, that's one of the things where we arrive as that first due engine company with 3 people. One person's already kind of committed to being the pump operator, throwing ladders on the exterior. They might be able to join the crew. You got your officer running to go do your 360, and you have your firefighter who's humping the line to the front door. So there's a lot of things that need to get accomplished in a short period of time. And if we go in there and there's more than that single family, or that single family is more than mom, dad, and kid and dog, we're already overwhelmed. And this is only a 9 to 1,100 square foot place. So I'll kind of taper off there until you get to the next part, Ben.
All right.
All right, same thing here. This is a single family dwelling. So we're talking about probably a 23 to 2,600 square foot structure, wood frame, of course, in that area of the country, with an attached garage. Do we know if anyone's living in that garage? Is it an actual vehicle garage? Is it a utility area? Or has that been made into a apartment? And I can tell you, when I first moved down here to South Florida, I lived in something that looked just like that garage, but it was my domicile. It was attached to another structure. So again, this is a single family dwelling, but there's a lot more. And Ben, can you go back just for one, please, to the single story? I guarantee if a firefighter, I shouldn't say guarantee, but if a firefighter gets in this structure here and something goes wrong, they can probably legitimately crawl 8 to 12 feet in any given direction and find an exit to the exterior, usually. So, if things go from sugar to shit, there's a reasonable chance that you can find an exit to the outside. And Ben, if you go forward for a second to that 2.5 story, please. This is like my old house. It's kind of similar. This is nicer though, but to my old house in Ocean City, if you go down that entire left wall of the house, there's not a single access to the outside, and you're talking probably 25, 30 feet. So again, there, you have stairs in here. You have, you could have a sunk, like a sunken living room. There's all sorts of different construction features, but here you might actually crawl 20, 25, 30, 35 feet on a wall and not be able to find an exit to the outside if conditions become untenable. Again, You've called in as that first in officer and said, we're on the scene, 2.5-story wood frame single family dwelling. And you are correct. This is a single family dwelling. Only one family lives there. Go to the next one, please, man. Okay, this is a single family dwelling. Now, granted, I had to poke my head around the corner of the iron gate to take this picture and was able to live to tell about it. But same thing here. This is a single family dwelling, and at the time it was in a unhydrated area. So, if you look at that first structure, that 900, 1100 square foot bungalow or cottage, and you look at this, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a builder, but there's a hell of a lot more sticks that were taken to build this house than there were the first one. And any first in officer who says this is a single family dwelling is correct. They are 110% correct, but it's completely different. The space is different. And just like you said, Ben, is it a small private dwelling, medium, large, or is it a BFH like this one is? So, you have to be able to look and say, paint that picture, and you might have nomenclature in your department. But again, if we go back because single family dwelling sounds cool on the radio, it doesn't paint a really accurate picture. One family lives in this place. Now, we could probably put 16 families in a place like this and have room left over. And that doesn't include the gardener, the butler, everybody else. But that's kind of a little bit of my thing. And just like I've heard some people on the radio too, will go to let's say a multifamily dwelling, and they'll say, oh, we're on the scene. We got a 3-story masonry condo. Well, condo is a real estate term. I don't care who takes care of the mulch and paints the shutters. That's meaningless. Is it a multifamily dwelling? Is it a mixed occupancy? I know some people like the type 1, type 2, type 3. I personally like to shy away from that because at 3 o'clock in the morning, for me to count to 5 is a different story, let alone to accurately depict what type of structure it is. And then we have a lot of those buildings too, like a masonry clad frame, for example. You look at a building that looks like it's a masonry building, but if you saw it being built, it's a facade wall or it's just tied in with a masonry facade, but it's actually a frame structure. So I'm going to get off my soapbox there about the single family dwellings. The whole point behind this is, regardless of what system you use, whether it's blue card, small, medium, large, McMansion, BFH, I don't care what it is, be consistent, but be able to paint that accurate picture. Because if I'm thinking that it's a private dwelling out where that last one was, that humongous place, there's places right down the road that look like the first one in that same neighborhood. And I don't know what the address is off the top of my head. So I'm thinking, okay, no big deal. 2 engines, a truck, a heavy rescue, a paramedic unit, battalion, we're good. Oh no! Now we have to get tankers in here. Now we have to strike additional alarms because of the sheer size of this place, and that first or second due company is going to be overwhelmed right off the bat. And that's one of those pack a lunch and stay for the day type of places. So Bobby and Ben, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, good, bad, and different with some of that nomenclature. Again, not splitting hairs, but that's just a little bit of my angst with the whole single family dwelling nomenclature.
Well, I actually, and this is the cool thing about this, because it's just sitting around the firehouse talking. I actually have a little bit of a different thought process about the types. I actually use the types on all my size ups, and we were fortunate enough to have Mike Lombardo, a retired fire commissioner from Buffalo, work with us and helped us train for a few years and live down. We were blessed to have him live down years, and he convinced me to do that, not because of the type number, which doesn't really matter, but to think about the construction before you attack it. And so, when I look at when I say a type 1 fire resistant structure, you can say fire resistant structure. At least you don't have to say it, but as long as you're thinking in your head, what's the characteristics of it? It's like an oven, but it probably won't fall on you. You're not breaching any walls to the outside of the place, that kind of stuff. So, but I appreciate the fact that remembering those numbers and stuff at 3 a.m. is probably not going to happen, and that's kind of it. And I think one of the things that the fire service and what we do with our size up, and even this class that you put together, Trevor, you have to ask yourself, what's different today? Everything. So you guys remember to size up stuff. Hey, daytime, nobody's home. What about COVID, right? Daytime, the kids are in school, you know? So everything's kind of different. I mean, I know in our particular area here at the beach, we have had just an influx of tens of thousands of people because they're retiring down here because they can, quote, work online. So that second house that you showed, I would expect to find a dining room to your right. But nowadays, with people trying to get healthy and CrossFit and things like that, it could very well be a gym with a bunch of dumbbells that fall on you when you run in there, thinking it's a dining room. Or it could be a home office that somebody's set up. Or it could be anything. So it's crazy that I look at your program and I think about how things are so different today, just in how people occupy their houses and just in what they're doing inside their houses and things like that. And so we got to kind of always run to keep up. We always got to kind of think about, what's kind of happening different. But I'm a huge fan of every single fire ground I walk up to, I size it up. And what do I mean by sizing it up? When you say you're first and five, what are you sizing up? Well, what is big windows? Big windows ain't bedrooms, you know? So big windows are usually living rooms, right? Well, what do you always have connected to your living rooms nowadays? It's all open concept. There's a kitchen, you know? You may not even have a dining room in these new houses anymore and things like that, right? But wherever all that stuff is, where's the bedrooms? In the other part of the house. So if it's a single story house and I see big windows on the left, I would expect to find bedrooms on the right, in a typical house like that. Small windows usually mean what? They mean it's a utility room, it's a laundry room, it's a bathroom, it's something like that, and so you can kind of cheat. I call it cheating the building. When you don't want to do a 360, that's fine. But what if you walk around to do a 360 and you find out there's a set of exterior steps that goes up and you're trying to do vanity search, or you do a 360, you find out it's a walkout basement and the basement has a bunch of fire in it before your guys go through the front door. So you may have times where you can't do a 360. Listen, we have big long buildings in Ocean City where you just can't do it. You got row homes, you got townhouses, you got stuff like that where you just physically can't do it. But if you don't do it, you don't get that third picture. And I think that's part of what Trevor and I talk a lot about this first at five is you may not be able to do certain things, but when you don't do certain things, you don't get certain information. And so, I look at everything and say size up. And the last point I'll give to you, Trevor, on that and to everybody is, let's say you go to a house and you show a 2-story house and there's a door in the middle like you would expect. You see large windows on the right side of the house and maybe regular sized windows on the left, and you're like, and so then you have a second story and you're like, that's probably bedrooms. I mean, typically that's what we do with bedrooms and things like that, right? And you go, okay, so I'm good to go. So let's say you are on a truck company, you want to do vent search. So you look up there, and I just told you the size of the windows, right? And you look up there, and they're all the same size windows, and you're like, okay, cool. And you start going to vent search. Well, then you get to that middle window that's the same size, and it just happens to be over that entry door. What could that window be? Well, it could be an opening, the stupid little thing that people put little trinkets up on and fall right to the first floor. That's kind of one of those examples. So even though you're cheating the building with your 360, even though you're cheating the building by kind of figuring out how it's laid out, you also have to do your due diligence with sounding before you go through a window, sounding the floor before you go in. We've been talking a lot about up here. We've had a lot of people going through floors lately, a lot. Way too many. And it's this parallel cord truss crap they're putting out there. It's everywhere. All these developments are building with this stuff, and it just has no strength to it when it has fire underneath of it and guys are falling through. Rest his soul, we had just lost a guy in Frederick, Maryland from that exact thing. That floor gave way and he kind of went down, and unfortunately he didn't make it. So I think there's a combination of what Trevor and I are talking about doing your sizing that thing up, doing your 360, but then also doing your due diligence. I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I slowed down doing my hose line advancements, and I really do try to sound the floor first. If it feels solid, you can move for a little bit. but then when you get to the bottom stair, check it again. Check the middle of the stairs, check the top of the stairs, those types of things. But I mean, it's just it's a constant. We're always reimagining ourselves. You know what we need to do, and kind of from there. So you gotta take what this program tells you, and you got to grow from that. And say, okay, well, what is the other things that we have to do? So just some of my thoughts about it. But I think you know, just looking at a building, and the biggest thing I could say is down. Slow down with your thought process. If you can get your chauffeur to slow down for that last block, it's worth $1 million in size up. If they fly in there and slam the brakes on, you can hardly see your three sides. You're probably going to miss a hydrant, you know. And then we need to have that time to kind of absorb, what is this saying, you know, what type of house is it? How much is it really on fire? How much fire is in there? What does it look like? You know, there's a lot of stuff that poor officer has to figure out. And if you're a super aggressive driver, you give him no chance. You just give him no chance. You're on the third side where you see it. So that's just some of my thoughts, Graham.
And Bobby, you're right. It's almost like same as positioning the truck is, you know, the white hat might say, I want you to take side A, but getting out and taking that 10 seconds to figure out exactly where you need to be saves so much time and effort, makes you so much more functional on the fire ground. I'm going back to a comment I see Esther put up. So, you know, if the first crew can't accomplish the 360, you must assign a crew to do it. And that goes back to that mission-based philosophy, because if we have priorities on the fire ground, not so much SOP based, but mission based and priority based, and if we can't accomplish it, that priority is still there. It still needs to be accomplished, and somebody needs to take up that slack. It doesn't mean that we juggle all these balls in the air and we drop one and it's okay. It's someone else has to pick it up, and we have to, just like if we don't lay out from a hydrant for whatever reason, then we didn't establish a primary water source, and we might have a very good reason not to have done that. But we need to articulate that if that's part of our mission-based process. And you know, Bobby, I agree with you, and it kind of goes back even to, remember when we had the financial crash back in what, 2008, I guess it was, and we had people who lost their homes and were living in their businesses. And I still remember vividly going to an industrial area over in box area 6 that, you know, 0 dark 30 in the morning, we're going into a hair salon that's in an industrial park, and you know, we're just going through the building, and we find a guy who is living in there because he lost his house. He worked in the hair salon that his mom owned, and he left a hot plate on. I mean, you're not thinking that it's going to be an occupied structure at that time in the morning, other than maybe a cleaning crew, something like that, if it's a larger thing. So, yeah, I think that's essential, Bobby. What you're saying is be adaptable to the times that we're living in, especially. I mean, your point with COVID is so well taken that, you know, people are really occupying their domiciles in non-traditional hours, and some people have given up automobiles, or they've sold them, and so you never know. And just like you said, Bobby, that size up is so critical and so important, and you have to adapt not only to the conditions that you're finding and the potential of who may or may not be home, but also, let's be very blunt about this too. You have to look at your crew and who's available as well. I mean, if all stations are in and that fire happens to occur at just the right time when you have all the resources arriving like they're supposed to, that's a good day for us. But there's other times when you might have it's you and somebody who's taken an overtime shift who normally doesn't work with you and your crew, so the cadence isn't there as it normally would be. And then you have Nicky New Guy on your shift who is just trying to do what they can, but they need a lot of guidance and a lot of direct supervision. So
my name is Ben.
That's okay. Well, okay, let's just call the guy Ben. But I mean, but that might actually alter your strategy and tactics a little bit, not because you're trying to do something different, but you understand the capabilities and limitations of what you have currently on that particular call. And I think that's something that needs to be factored in anytime that you're looking at that first 5 minutes. If you have that A-team crew and you've got another crew right on their tail that's really dialed in, you're going to be able to accomplish a lot of those missions and a lot of those priorities a lot sooner than if you're by yourself for several minutes because everyone else is busy, and you just might not have the that cohesiveness of the crew because it's not a normal crew for you. So I think that, and then Yeah, Ben, I know you wanted to get a little bit because we're kind of running towards the end. About some of the tactics, and one of the things I talk about too is, and Bobby, I know you're big into this, is really pre-planning and training, and it's not so much trying to write everything down to put in your database. That's great, but give you an example. You might have let's say you have a high rise, and they may or may not allow you or appreciate the fact that you're going to go up in their high rise and train and stretch hose down their freshly carpeted hallway. Well, on our engines where I work, I give them those measuring wheels, like the utility wheels, and if they ever, guess what, they can click it right on out. And I tell them, I said, guess what, 200 feet of hose is the same length as 200 feet of rope. It's not the same. You're not getting the reps and sets of pulling the hose line, but if you're trying to figure out your stretch, then take that rope bag down the hallway. That's something that we can put together pretty quickly, especially if we're not out of service for training or whatever else. Or take that measuring wheel, and I can tell you, I'm very proud of the fact that my crews can tell me what's not going to be serviced by those pre-connects, because we get so fixed on what we can service, which is probably about 95% of our first due, give or take, with our pre-connected hand lines, but we don't think about stretch estimation. And I'm going to be a little bit, I want to say crass about this, because I want Ben to show some of the buildings. But if you want a true measure of how well your people can estimate distances and stretches, go in the bathroom of the firehouse. And if they're falling short of the urinal, obviously they cannot do a distance estimation very well. And I actually have a formula for it. It's the perceived performance, the PP. And if you divide that by the potential obvious outcome, the POO, then you'll actually get the true predictability, the TP. So I know that's kind of goofy, but at the same time, I mean, you'll see that equation a little bit. It's like, hold on a minute. If you can't estimate where that cross lay is going to reach the overwhelming majority of the time and not be surprised, you've got to go out and train. And I kind of say that tongue in cheek to look in the firehouse, because there's some people that obviously they cannot figure out the reach and distance for a stream in the urinal, let alone on the fire ground. So go out there, look at some of the things. And Ben, if you don't mind, could you put up that one building for me, the one on Dorchester? Here's a classic example. Downtown building, Ocean City. You see the double yellow line in the middle of the street. You see the parking spaces delineated out front, and the offset of the structure is mere feet on the other side of the sidewalk. So when we talk about estimating that first length coming off the engine and the first 50 feet to get to the door, we're going to have to manage some hose lines. So we look at this, and typically, as tight as the structures are, especially in that area of the city, we look and go, okay, here's a 2.5, maybe we'll call it 3-story wood frame structure, older structure. Our cross lay should have no problem reaching everywhere. As a matter of fact, we'll probably have extra to manage, just because where the engine pulls up, and for those folks who aren't familiar with this particular area, it's a tight street. So you're thinking to yourself, man, 200 feet is going to be more hose than what we can say grace over, not a problem. But then you start looking down the side of the structure. Then, if you would, you're looking down the Bravo side. That shows you a little bit. And then if you go, Ben, show me the Delta side, please. Okay. So this is one contiguous structure all the way back. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms, and Ben, if you don't mind being my cursor person for me, if you look at that second floor white balcony all the way back, just underneath where that chimney is, I can tell you in no uncertain terms that a 200-foot cross lay will stretch from the engine down the side of that structure, up both flights of those stairs, in the door of the second floor apartment, and will be 3 feet short of getting in the back bedroom. And the reason I know that is because I screwed up and thought it was going to reach. And again, it was one of those things where, like, wow, when you have to call for a backup line to go 3 more feet, they say baseball is a game of inches. Well, guess what? Firefighting is too. And, so I messed that one up. I thought we would hit it with the 200 feet. I was close, but not close enough. So that's where I really got into looking at these, not relying on the pre-connects as much, but looking at positioning, looking at estimated stretches, and being able to really calculate that fairly accurately. And Bobby, I know you use this kind of as a little bit of a tool. I mean, you'll talk about like the length of a ladder truck as far as like a length of hose. And I've got guys in my department that they'll count paces, or they use, one of them drives tractor trailers in his off time, so he knows that the trailer is 52 or 53 feet long, and so that's how he kind of estimates what a length is. So whatever works for you, please do it. But yeah, Ben, I'd like to hear from you and Bobby on that, because stretching short once, you can chalk it up to experience. But if you do it consistently, then you're probably you're that person leaving those little piddle puddles on the floor.
You're not going to believe this, Trevor, but we had a bedroom fire in that same building, but it was the second balcony, so the third balcony, our 200 worked fine.
Shut up.
Yeah, so talking about stretching, we actually just did a training the other night in Salisbury, and I, like Bobby has mentioned, the length of the ladder truck is about 50 feet. If you roll it out and look, you're right in that ballpark. So that's one of the things that I told our folks that night. And the other thing I told them, I said, what's the length of the sidewalk in between the creases? What's the length of what's the width of a parking spot? What's the depth of a parking spot? So know what those are ahead of time. So as you're pulling up, even if you're sitting in the back, you can kind of see how far it is away from something. Know the width of a road. So if you're on the center line, how much space do you have to get to the front? So it's just that kind of stuff. And I tell you, our folks, they loved the length of a ladder truck. I mean, that's what is more practical in the fire service than saying the length of a ladder truck. And Kevin Belcher, if you're watching, I'm sorry, man. It's the best comparison that I've heard. I know you're an engine guy from start to finish, but it works. So that was something that when Bobby said that, I was like, holy shit, like, talk about a light bulb going on.
He's on a medical local right now. He'll get back to you just as soon as he's available.
Okay. And before he takes the next one. But that was fantastic, so that's something that I know that I've always kind of struggled with as far as estimating my stretches. In Salisbury, we were traditionally a bumper line department. We had two bumper lines that we could go and we could put in service incredibly quickly. And now we've kind of transitioned one on the bumper and three off the back. So it's where, the guys have made a great job transitioning to that. Ocean City, we go off the back a lot. So it's, you have to get used to what you have. And Trevor has talked about, stretching short on that one fire. The other thing that I would give a little caution to is you don't want to overstretch consistently. If you always pull a 350 and you can get away with a 150, then you probably need to work on your estimation too. Because trying to manage the extra 200 feet in the front yard or wherever can be difficult.
And Ben, to that point, I know somewhere in that presentation there's a picture of the fire we had at the Wellington some years ago, and that was a stretch that we made from a cross leg going up an exterior fire escape and going down a third floor hallway. Very highly occupied building at the time, and we went in and did what we needed to do, knock the fire down, and of course, we felt really, really good about ourselves. The only problem was, looking at hindsight, and again, not being critical, but just thinking critically, is if that fire had gone one more unit over, we wouldn't have had enough hose line to get there. So even though we were successful in what we did, we didn't plan ahead to say, and to your point, Ben, exactly, I agree with you. You don't want to keep overstretching and have all this hose to manage either. But that was one of those things. There you go. When we went up that exterior stairwell, we were able to get up there. The engine was parked in the alleyway, and like I said, things went very, very well on that. However, if that fire had been one more unit to the east, or to screen right in this case, we would have stretched short. So that would have been something that, even though we were successful, when we asked for a backup line to be pulled, instead of pulling the same length backup line, we should have called for a 350, not to overstretch, but for the fact that, once we knew that we, had gone to the maximum of our capabilities, and if anything was outside of that, we would have needed a different resource. So I think you have to be dynamic in everything that you do. And there's sometimes where your cross lay is going to be way too much to deal with. And that's where the hose management comes in. So, these are all the things we talk about. That first 5 minutes is so important. And it's not to play the what if game with every possible inevitability on the fire ground, but to say, okay, downtown we have very small or very shallow offsets of our structures off of the street. Midtown, little mix. North end, you might be 15, 20, 30, 35, 50 feet back, where the first coupling is actually going over the threshold of the door. That's a fully stretched. So, it really comes into, knowing your area and kind of getting these things down. Like most departments mark the midpoint of their hose lanes. And we certainly do the same thing on our deuce and a half lines for high rise. We were doing rope stretches the other night. I said, don't worry about feet, worry about lengths. And, how many lengths is it going to take you to get from here to here, here to here, and you're going backwards and forwards. And that way they start estimating what they need, not only to get the job done on the fire floor with their nozzle bundle, but also if we had to circumvent the standpipe and actually do a rope stretch or make our own, what would you need? And they were amazed that they had more hose than what they needed. And it was successful. The stretch that they did. But when they looked at the midpoint, they go, holy crap, it only took 25 feet of hose to get to the third floor balcony of this mid-rise. Great, now you know. And so that's, to me, that's one of the neat things, is where they can start really using whatever trick works for them to estimate. And Bobby, you've been a great proponent of that. And I just like Ben, I think that the ladder truck trick is phenomenal, but whatever works for people. And it's about shaving those seconds off too in those first 5 minutes, because it's whether it's bunking out, getting your gear on quickly. You're not going to make up time on the street, but it's your efficiency once you get there. And I've always been a big proponent of checking your fire apparatus, especially your SCBA and some of your components, with your fire gloves on, because once you go to that front door and you lay your nozzle down, then you take your gloves off, and then you set them down, then you take your helmet off, and then you put your hood on, you put your helmet back on, you put your mask on, then you put your hood on, then you put your helmet back on, then you put your little mittens back on, versus being able to do all that stuff with the dexterity of your fire gloves on. That might have shaved 12 seconds off of something, and then the additional time that you've practiced to know what to do if something goes wrong, that you don't focus on what went wrong. You turn and focus on the mission to say, okay, what do I need to do to accomplish the mission? Yes, the stretch of the hose line just went terribly wrong. Put that behind you, and what am I going to do now? Am I going to try to untangle this? Am I going to pull a second line? If that doesn't work, so it's that consistency of keep moving forward and having that continuum, if you will, of options, and people just don't get fixed in that one thing, or they don't start getting pissed off because something didn't work, and then everything just falls to crap at that point.
Trevor, I don't know if you can see the question on the screen from Claude. Actually, it's from Esther. He put a second comment up, but on that fire, did you guys hit it with the aerial first, or did you just stretch down the hallway?
No, we did the stretch down the hallway, and that's one of the confusing things sometimes when you see fireground photos. It only captures a fraction of a second in time. That was going to be, depending on the conditions on the third floor. This is a fully occupied building. We had a lot of the foreign exchange students in the building at that time in particular. But we were fortunate enough that fire got knocked just prior to the aerial being in position, but they were positioning just in case we had difficulty getting into that area. So the short answer is it was suppressed via a 1 3/4 hand line, but the aerial was being placed for suppression just in case we had any issues or it got out of control.
Gotcha. Is that a common attic across there?
Yeah, it's a common cockloft, and as a matter of fact, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, those cupolas that are on the roof are actually, I believe, they were only decorative. They weren't actually functional, but there was a common cockloft up in the attic, and fortunately, that fire was contained to the one unit. And this goes kind of back to Bobby's point. You see in between where the fire unit is, and just to the left, you have the smaller window, and that's actually the bathroom window. There was they actually had a shared bathroom, I believe. Again, it's been so long, but as you kind of march down the structure, you can see the different size windows. And to Bobby's point about size up, and you all have seen this time and time again, and especially with some of the like buildings here, they charge an arm and a leg for rent, and you might have 12 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So that, there again, it just, we get overwhelmed very, very quickly in those first 5 minutes. But if we can get, at least some degree of, getting people evacuated from the building, get some sort of fire suppression, regardless of what, if it's interior or exterior, combination of the two, depending on conditions and the appropriate tactics at the time. You all especially, or anybody who has multifamily dwellings, is kind of living in this. And again, going back to Bobby's point, in this day and age, you have no idea how many people could be occupying, that 900 square foot house. You could have a lot of people to begin with, but especially in this day and age, you might have multiple families in there. But again, going back to looking at our basic size up things, are there kids' toys in the front yard? Is there a wheelchair ramp? Do you see, a handicap or disabled placard on a vehicle out front that might tell you somebody inside has mobility issues? There's so many different things that we need to be cognizant of, and just keep our head on a swivel, because next week there could be something completely different that's going to challenge us even more than today, if you can believe it.
Yep, absolutely. So that we're going to kind of wrap up here. That was just kind of a glimpse into the first in, first five program that we teach through Strike the Box. It's a great program. Trevor came over, it was probably 2013 or 14 to Salisbury, did it one night for us at Station 1. It was phenomenal. And I know he's done it a couple other places. I think I went to one up in Millville before that. So it's a great program. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. There was a great conversation going on between the folks in the chat. So if you guys have any questions or anything you want to reach out, please let us know. I think everybody that was commenting in there either has our contact information or we know them. So if there's anything that you guys need, please, like I said, reach out to us. Let me kick it down to Bobby for some closing comments.
Oh, sorry I was late. Fun times. It was a great conversation. I think that Claude has earned a future spot on the show, because he's come up with I think if you come up with 6 good points in a row, you just automatically get a spot on here. So, Claude, you got to set your time up accordingly. Figure out what Thursday you're available for us, and actually you have our contact information, so you can let us know. No, it's been a great time, and listen, we're all coming, all back out and doing things again, and not all locked down from COVID anymore. Get back out there, training, practice, do your thing, size up things, and most importantly, stay safe out there. And it's great talking to you guys.
Thanks, Bobby. Trevor?
Yes, sir. Ben, thanks for putting this together and kind of giving a little insight into the first in, first five. There's a ton of other things that we discuss during that program. But one of the biggest take-home points, and I think between our, Claude and Esther and Bloomy and Jarman and Rat and Chief Black, all the people that are coming on tonight, I just see so many that are out there and who have the experience behind them. Merit all of them. So it's really about knowing your capabilities and limitations, being realistic in what you can and can't do, and trying to make the greatest impact for the greatest good within those first 5 minutes. And part of that is going back to Frank Brannigan's book about building construction for the fire service. Know your buildings. we're not going to know everything about them. There's a lot of people doing some midnight renovations, but by trying to pre-plan these things a little bit, knowing your stretches, but also just, Bobby, I know you're big into this too, is time training. There's some crews that are going to get things done quickly. There's others that might operate at the speed of smell, not because they're bad. They just need the extra reps and sets. So, with that being said, take the time to train and be very honest with yourself, be honest with your crews, and assess your capabilities and limitations, and always try to set that next goal realistically to say, okay, if we're 10 seconds faster stretching that line next time and getting water on the fire, and we don't have kinks, and things went well, it's success. But just remember who we're there for, and who we're trying to get down the hallway to, and what we're trying to do. And if you get that fire out, 90% of your problems are going to go away. So please keep training, and reach out to some of the people. We have, like Bobby said, some great conversation, and these are all leaders in our industry that are tuning in and commenting. I mean, these folks, they've been there, they see it, and they still have the passion, even though they've been at this for a long time. So with that, thank you very much. And Bobby, I agree with you. I think we ought to get old Claude on here, and we can talk about some of that weird Canadian beer he drinks, and then some fire tactics at the same time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can make that work out. So again, thanks for everybody for joining. Thanks, Bobby and Trevor. It's always fun catching up and getting to chat with you guys. So one last before we head out. Cheers. If you guys do want to catch up with Strike the Box, our information is scrolling across the bottom. So there's our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, phone, whatever it is. I think it's going across the bottom. So if you guys have questions or comments, like I said, please feel free to reach out to us. We have talked to retired Captain Mike Dugan from the FDNY, and we're trying to set something up to get him on here. Claude, sounds like you're coming back. Maybe we can get you and Esther at the same time. That was a great conversation with Esther, so it'd be fun to have you guys back on. So a lot of great stuff coming from Strike the Box training. Again, we're going to try and do a special guest and alternate that with just an insight to some of our classes. So keep paying attention, keep watching us, and we truly appreciate the support and everybody tuning in to see what we have to say. And thank you guys again for your comments. It was a great discussion in the comments tonight. So thank you. Have a great night and stay safe.